my pleasure to bring onto the stage George Allen, Chairman, Lowell Farms. Come on, George. Let's get a round of applause, guys. Come on. There we go. Right. There we go. And George, we got the ticker right here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Really grateful to be here. Let me just ask for a show of hands. Who here knows Lowell Smokes or Lowell Farms? Just want to make sure how uneducated this market is. I hope you do. Thank you very much for those of you who know the business. I have to say, it's a strange feeling to be at an investor conference and be nervous. It's been a long time. I don't know if it's because I'm in front of real people. We're actually wearing pants this time, but it's nice to be back with everyone. So thanks so much for having us. So I come here today from the future. And luckily for you, the future of cannabis is located exactly 95 miles south on the 101 in California from the airport in San Francisco. And why do I say it's the future? Well, I think it's really important for us all to see what's happening in California and recognize that California is basically where the rest of this industry is going. And from my standpoint, the reason why I went out to California, the reason why I chose this business, and the reason why we've been building it the way we've been building it, is we've been designing it against what we think the future state of the industry is. It's hyper competitive, and it's a place where economies of scale and efficiencies matter. And we'll go through that in a little bit. I hope I'll convert you as to how we're going to win the cannabis industry from our little corner of the world in Salinas, California. So before we do that, here we go. Assume you all read that. So this is the company in a nutshell. We focus mainly in California right now. We have vertical operations. We'll talk a little bit about that. Our enterprise value is somewhere around $243 million. Now, I think it's really important to talk about what makes us different. Like, we talk a lot about a bunch of cannabis companies, and this is the busiest landscape we've ever seen of public cannabis companies. And I think it's really important to understand what the differentiators between our business and those in the landscape. So first of all, and I'll go into this in a little bit more detail, but we have a completely unique approach to sourcing raw materials. And what we're doing is using a massively competitive market to our benefit to drive raw material costs and quality as opportunistically as we can. And that's something you can only do when you have a massive gauntlet of competition on the cultivation side like we have in California. The second thing that we do really unique is we have our own captive distribution. We push products every single day to almost every dispensary in California. That means we can activate brands and bring products to market in almost every corner of this evolving California landscape for cannabis consumers. Now, the next thing we do is, and I'm going to talk about this in more detail, but we're very focused on scale and automation to drive cost leadership. We just invested recently in our large-scale processing center that sits in the middle of the Salinas Valley, where we get the benefit of 5 million square feet of canopy in our backyard. If you draw a circle around our processing facility of 3 miles, you'll capture 4.2 million square feet of canopy. That's more canopy than exists anywhere else in this country, active canopy. So from my perspective, when we went into this business, it was all about how are we going to make that canopy work for us as opposed to compete against it. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And the next thing we have is Lowell Smokes. Lowell Smokes is one of the true viral brands in the industry. It's one of the first brands to really talk about bringing cannabis into the party. It's a brand that you brag about. Most of cannabis form factors were really built on the premise of discretion. The gummy, the vape pen, they're all built on this concept that you're hiding your cannabis consumption. And that's great for a consumer that's uncertain about how much cannabis they want to show the world. But if you want to build a brand, you want to build a brand that's on par with automobiles or apparel or fashion or jewelry. You have to build a brand that's premised on the notion that people want to share it with others. And that's what's really important about Lowell Smokes. We dropped this seed crystal into Illinois and Massachusetts earlier this summer, and we saw explosive growth around the brand with zero marketing. Zero marketing. The reason is our consumers are doing the marketing for us. They walk into a party and they show it to their friends, and their friends show up at the dispensary asking for the brand. Now, that doesn't happen in a lot of cannabis brands, and it's something that we think is really important and something we're going to build on. Lastly, and I don't really go put this into our presentation, we have a plan to win and not participate. I'll share it with you because we're in the same room today, and I feel like my competitors are in the room, so I'm going to share it with all of you. Please don't tell anybody. But here's our strategy. It's really basic. We build infrastructure in California that allows us to bring the lowest cost raw materials to market for our brands and distribute them the most efficiently and effectively to dispensaries across the state. And then we take fledgling brands that show promise and put them onto that platform via acquisition or our own original investment. And the reason why that works is because those brands don't have that infrastructure to be successful, but they also represent these flashpoints of success. Now, in order to understand why this strategy makes sense, you have to remember that brands are extremely ephemeral. What makes a brand successful is something that's very difficult to put your finger on, but you know it when you see it. Consumers decide, and they decide based on a moment in time, the situation at large, and they decide based on a product and how it touches them at that moment in time. And Lowell is particularly electric when it comes to that dynamic, but it's not alone. There's many brands out there that are going to be built in cannabis. We have a member of our team who runs ultra marathons using gummies. Now, I don't know if that's an anomaly or if that's something that is a real category, but you can guarantee that if that's a real category, the concept of long-term, exercise and competition using cannabis, you can guarantee that there will be brands built around that premise. So our platform is one that takes these brands and can electrify them and distribute them, gain audience, gain share, and gain unit economics by distributing across the state. Then the next step is we take those brands using an asset-light methodology and we expand those brands into other markets. We've done this with Massachusetts and Illinois, and stay tuned for a heck of a lot more with Lowell Smokes, but that has the potential to be explosive. Now, you can't just take any brand and shove it into a dispensary. It has to have that dynamic ability to talk to a consumer. And where better to find that than the cauldron that is the California dispensary? And so that's our business model. The reason why we do it in an asset-light model is because I have a belief, and I'm sure it's not a very popular belief, but I have a belief that once we hit this moment of legalization, products are going to flow freely across this country, regardless of what state laws say. Because once you can put our products in a mail package without consequence from the federal government, we're going to see harmonization across this country around branding, around packaging, and most importantly, around pricing. So you better be ready for it. So let's talk a little bit about the California landscape. This is what I call the cauldron, because it is extremely competitive, and you can guarantee that these numbers are growing and changing every single day. We have almost 1,000 outdoor operators. That number has grown by almost 50% over the last year, just in growing alone. We've got greenhouse operators, 1,200 greenhouse operators, many of which are in the Salinas Valley itself. And we've got about 500 indoor operators just on the growing side. Now, if you're growing cannabis, it's not like you are incredibly fiscally responsible. What you're searching for is that ultimate genetic, that lottery ticket of color and genetic and nose that's going to fly off the shelf when it hits a dispensary. And most of them are going to fail, but some of them are going to be successful. And that's our job, is to sit on top of that network and infrastructure to capture all those lottery tickets. When it comes to brands, you have an equally competitive landscape out there. Brands constantly throwing themselves at the wall to see if they stick. Our job, again, is to vacuum up the ones that we see as having a winner's potential. Now, from a distribution perspective, this is a logistics exercise. This is a very complicated logistics exercise, and we're one of the few operators in the entire state that actually does it ourselves. Most operators in the state rely on third-party distributors that really struggle to actually differentiate the product. When you're counting on somebody else to sell your product into a dispensary, you can guarantee that they're not going to do as good a job as you or your team members would do. And lastly, on retail, it's also extremely competitive. California has struggled with the dispensary count. It lags way behind Oregon and California in terms of dispensary per popula. The reason for that is that we have had local jurisdictions that have been dragging their feet in cannabis, but this number is constantly growing. And our job is to view that dispensary channel as our primary customer. We need to serve them better than anybody else does. Because if I give them brands that move on their shelf and I give them customer service, they're not going to go anywhere else. And that's our strategy. So let's talk about cultivation, because this is important. And if you've been following our business, you saw us take a bit of a pivot. When we originally got into cultivation, it was about making our greenhouse better. And I really struggled with this because I went and studied our greenhouse and I watched our greenhouse. And we did. We took our greenhouse from growing 6,000 pounds a month to about 6,000 pounds a year to about 40,000 pounds in annual production. So a huge increase in annual production. And I was really pleased with that. And we drove our cost at the greenhouse lower than almost anybody else growing greenhouse cannabis in the entire state. But it felt to me that there was too many operators in the greenhouse landscape. Two things really changed my view as to why we should pivot when it came to cultivation. The first was we saw that there was a 50% increase year over year in the number of applicants growing outdoor cannabis in California. The reason why that exploded is because policy changed. Counties that had historically prohibited saw the tax windfall and decided to go in on it. So we saw a dramatic increase in the number of outdoor canopy. That meant we're going to see a lot more flower coming down the pike from outdoor growers. The second was that when I really paid attention to where the consumer was drawing lines, the consumer was not willing to pay more for mixed light greenhouse canopy on a similar quality spectrum as they were for outdoor canopy. Yet the cost to grow outdoor canopy is about half the price of greenhouse. So it really made us wonder, wait, should we invest in more greenhouses or should we come up with something better? So we actually sat down as a team, we spent a lot of time reviewing this, and we found a weakness in the value chain around drying and trimming and curing. And so we built a facility earlier this summer. We built a facility that's entirely focused on providing services and a services layer to outdoor canopy. So we go out and we buy outdoor flower from growers on the day of harvest. And we don't take any of the risk, any of the peril risk that a grower has with growing their own canopy. We don't take any of that risk because we buy it on the day of harvest. We test it before we buy that weed. And then we cure it and we control the cure. Now, if you know cannabis, you know that the drying, the curing, and the trimming is about half the value in all of the quality of the product. So what we do is we go out and pick the best outdoor weed and we bring it into our facility and we make it our weed. Now, I've been able to take our cost of flower down almost in half by doing that. And I've increased our cost of flower almost fivefold by doing that without having to put in the $60 to $100 a square foot that it costs to build a greenhouse. So that's something that's been really important to us. Now, we use that in complement for our existing greenhouse, which I have to say is producing some of the absolute finest cannabis I've ever seen in the landscape. We continue to march higher in terms of potency and yields at our greenhouse, and I'm incredibly proud of our team. But it's about driving California into a place where we can use it to make money for our business and not compete with the vast array or landscape that's out there. Centralized functions that nobody else is investing in this marketplace. Also, we're very focused on strain diversification, cost leadership through economies of scale. That's pivotal here, and we're watching a marketplace now where we see a tremendous amount of price competition. So let's go on to Lowell Farm Services. We commissioned this, as I said, earlier this summer. The whole business behind this model is I go out and provide drying and trimming services for third-party growers. A subset of our drying capacity, we use what we call the merchant model, where we buy flower and I end up with a price point that's about $200 per pound, well below what anybody else's price point in the entire country is for flower. That's really critical. Let's skip ahead because before we run out of time, I do want to talk about what we're doing on branding. So all of this investor presentation, you'll humor me, is on our website. I'm sure I'm going to see traffic spike. I really appreciate, but let's go. I want to talk about going outside of California. Now, when we bought Lowell Smokes, it was a captive California brand, and we had to make a decision as to where are we going to take that brand. I saw enormous opportunities in other marketplaces, but we were tentative. We've all seen brands struggle to launch in other marketplaces. The historical pattern of brands not reaching critical mass in their home markets, yet thinking that there were greener pastures elsewhere. We've watched a lot of people run into fence posts in that business. So from our standpoint, it was about, let's see how it works. Then what we did was we dropped our product, this product, the Lowell Smokes product. It's our hero product. It does all of our own advertising for us. And we dropped this product into Illinois, and we saw explosive growth. We saw hand over fist orders coming in from dispensaries across the state at a price point that was at a substantial premium to already elevated Illinois prices. What it shows you is that people want a cannabis brand that they can be proud about. People want a cannabis brand that comes into the party. Lowell is an irreverent but sexy middle finger to those who have kept cannabis in the closet for so long. And that brand deserves to be in every single marketplace that's going through legalization discovery, where consumers are coming online and deciding that they want to be proud about their cannabis choice. And Lowell's a brand for that consumer. Lowell's a brand that you bring in and you show your parents and they grab the box and they can't stop playing with it because it's suddenly for them, it's not a bong or a volcano. It's sexy, it's cool, it's very tangible to understand why that brand resonates with consumers. So we've launched it so far. You can see from this tiny little brand, we have the second largest social media footprint across all of cannabis. And we've launched that brand in Illinois, in Massachusetts. The way our terms work, we have fantastic partners in Ascend Wellness, who's getting a lot out of our relationship. But we launched that brand so far in Illinois, Massachusetts, and the way we do it is we take a 15% royalty on wholesale, and we are in active discussions to march this same model across the country. Now, is it going to be the only brand we're going to do it with? Probably not. I see other brands that have equal potential in California to get the lift from our platform and also have the expansion opportunities in other markets. Stay tuned for more. With that, I think I'm going to open it up with questions. So please give me a question because I'm so excited to be here, and it'll just make me so happy. Like, I got one. Awesome.
So how do you control quality, and do you smoke it yourself? Do you have a team of smokers?
I mean, is that a first-person question for me?
So the question was, how do you control quality, and do you smoke it yourself?
So, well, I do smoke it myself, but I'm not the determinant of quality, if that was your question. So, it's funny. If you know what to look for, quality in cannabis is something that you can find, right? It's very easy to go see an outdoor harvest that's a week before harvest. You can do the potency test. You can actually check to see the density of the nugs. You can understand the structure, the color. Color is a big factor in California for the California consumers. So there are ways for us to go and evaluate quality before. And I have to say, on every metric, our own greenhouse is constantly marching upwards in terms of quality. Follow-up question.
Yeah. So in the outdoor cultivation, you have pesticide and water quality issues, and also genetic testing.
So what's really fun is we do an enormous amount of genetic testing, and I think the long-term future of our business is giving genetics to outdoor farmers. Right? We work really hard to produce new and novel genetics. It's really about staying at that cutting edge for the consumer in California. So what we do is we spend a lot of time on that type of quality assessment. When it comes to pesticides in California, yeah, there's areas in California that are ag heavy where we get a lot of pesticides. And the Salinas Valley, for one, is one that's not suitable for outdoor cultivation. But we see a lot of successful outdoor cultivation in the interior counties in the state that have traditionally been wine regions or which would have been a lot less pesticides, or not agriculture at all. Another question. I'm so fortunate.
I just want to mention one last thing. My name is Lowell.
Hey, there you go. Copyright enforced. You're not allowed to use your name anymore. Sorry, guys. Blue Jacket. Yeah, very much not asset light. I want to be careful about that. We move cannabis via 18-wheeler into, yeah. We're a net buyer of wet cannabis. Wet cannabis is very different than buying dried. There's no market for wet cannabis. We partner with farms.
So if we ever got the bid to a flower shop market again, how does that market model work?
So I think, God forbid we ever turn to a show. I wouldn't use that expression. So we also have our own greenhouse that gives us a backstop of supply. Today, that supply is more than adequate for us in a shortage scenario. What I will say is I think it's a hybrid between owned and sort of what we call the pinch point strategy. But I think what we're going to see is an increased amount of canopy out of California. I think what will balance prices out of California is much more around nationalization of demand than deteriorating supply in California. Any other questions? I think we'll have time for one more.
I know it's words about, but I know you said something about before nationalization would be able to ship or mail product out of California before.
No, I think what I said was, so this is my belief. I think what you're going to see is prices balance out in California once federal legalization occurs, or more importantly, once federal decriminalization occurs. The states will do everything they can to stop it, but they're going to have to be searching every single FedEx and UPS package. Right there. I'll give you the real quick answer to that. We see potency levels at all three categories that can get into the low to mid 30s. So there's really not much difference. What you tend to get more in indoor production is a little bit more consistency and a fair bit more color, which tends to get more of a premium price. There's also a fair amount of ephemeral concepts around nose that consumers pay more for in indoor pricing. We haven't seen indoor pricing fall quite as much as we've seen outdoor and greenhouse for that reason.
All right, everyone, give it up for George
Thank you very
Allen,
much. I appreciate it.
Chairman, Lowell Farms.